Hello, I'm Jerry Fort. Welcome to Jungle Jerry's Treehouse. I'm back after a couple weeks. I think it's been like I had the 4th of July, and we had had a couple of days vacation and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. A week before that, we had or a couple of weeks ago or so, we had a bad storm come through Tulsa, and it's just been a mess. So it's been a while since I've read some out of this book here. I think this is part 2 from the Magic Treehouse number 32, A Merlin Mission, Winter of the Ice Wizard by Mary Pope Osborne. So we left off at chapter 4, Take My Sleigh. Jack sat on the frozen ground. Annie, Teddy, and Kathleen sat nearby. They were all too shocked to speak. The night was quiet. Overhead, the full moon shined brightly, and a few cold stars twinkled in the clear sky. Finally, Annie broke the silence. "I wonder what he did to Merlin and Morgan," she said. "I wonder where you will find his eye," said Teddy. "I wonder how we'll carry it around," said Jack. "And I wonder if the wolves are near," said Kathleen. She stood up and looked around, pulling her cloak tightly around her. "Well, does anyone remember the Ice Wizard's rhyme?" said Teddy. "Yes," said Kathleen. She repeated the rhyme perfectly by heart. "Take my sleigh and find your way to the house of the Norns in the curve of the bay. Pay them whatever they tell you to pay, and bring back my eye by break of day." "What are Norns?" asked Jack. "I have read about the Norns in Morgan's books," said Teddy. "They are known as the Sisters of Fate. They spend their days weaving great tapestries. Their weaving determines the fate of all who live in the land behind the clouds." So the Norns have his eye. So the Norns have his eye?" said Jack. "That's who he meant when he said he traded with the Fates?" "It would seem so," said Teddy. "He said we should take his sleigh to find them," said Annie. "Where's his sleigh?" "Look," said Kathleen, pointing. "'Tis there." "Oh, wow," said Annie. Not far away, a strange-looking silver sleigh glided silently from behind a snowbank. The sleigh looked like a small sailing ship with shiny runners. No one was steering it, and no horses or reindeer were pulling it. From its mast, a white sail drooped in the still air. As the sleigh slid to a stop, an eerie howl shattered the calm of the windless night. "Wolves!" cried Teddy. "Let us make haste." Kathleen grabbed his arm. "Do not run," she said. "If we run, they will chase us." "Yes, of course," said Teddy. "They must not see that we are afraid." Another howl shattered the air. "Run!" cried Teddy. They all charged across the snow to the sleigh and scrambled into it. Jack and Kathleen stood at the front, and Annie and Teddy stood at the back. "There they are!" cried Teddy, pointing. "The white wolves of the night." Jack turned and saw 2 large white wolves dashing across the plain in the moonlight. As the wolves ran toward the sleigh, their big paws scattered snow around them. "Go, go, go!" cried Jack, clutching the front of the sleigh. But the sleigh didn't move, and the wolves kept coming. "How can we make it go?" cried Jack. "Use the wind string," said Teddy. Jack pulled the knotted string the wizard had given him out of his pocket. "Use it how?" he shouted. "Untie a knot," said Teddy. Jack pulled off his gloves. His fingers were trembling as he tried to untie one of the knots. "This is crazy," he thought. How can untying a knot in a string help us?" But soon he managed to loosen one of the knots. A cold breeze began blowing from behind the sleigh. It ruffled the sail overhead. "Untie another," shouted Teddy. "Hurry!" Jack quickly untied a second knot. The breeze grew stronger, and the sail filled out a bit more. The sleigh's shiny runners began sliding across the snow. "Yay!" called Annie. "It works!" Yes, but not nearly swiftly enough, said Teddy. Jack looked back. The two white wolves had almost caught up with them. They were yelping and running behind the sleigh. Their mouths were open, showing their sharp teeth. Jack quickly untied a third knot. A cold wind blasted the sail. It opened up with a snap, and the sleigh shot forward. That's a big sleigh. It does look like a ship. Stand fast, cried Teddy. Jack, Annie, and Kathleen held tightly to the sides of the sleigh to keep from falling out. Teddy grabbed the rudder and steered them over the snow, away from the ice palace. The wizard's sleigh zoomed across the frozen ground, leaving the white wolves in its wake. Their yelping noises grew fainter and fainter until they could be heard no more. Here they are way back here. Man, that sleigh must be really going fast, huh? The wind kept pushing the silver sleigh over the ice and snow. The runners made swish, swish sounds as they slid over the moonlit plain. The square sail billowed in the wind like the sail of a Viking ship. With the wolves far behind, the ride was really fun, but cold. How did you know untying knots would make the wind blow? Jack asked Teddy. 'Tis an ancient magic, said Teddy. I have read of wind strings, but had never seen one. It's a good thing you read so much, said Annie. Oh, look, said Kathleen. Hares and foxes. Where? Said Annie. There. Kathleen pointed into the dark distance. Playing in the snow, and listen, whistling swans overhead behind that cloud. Wow, said Annie. Jack was amazed by Kathleen's power to see and hear so many things. As before, the moonlit landscape seemed completely empty to him. Where are you steering us? Annie asked Teddy. I have no idea, said Teddy, laughing. We're supposed to go to a curve of a bay to find the Norns, said Annie. Then turn left and follow the swans, said Kathleen, pointing across the snowy plain. They are flying toward the sea. Teddy swerved the sleigh to the left. For a while they bounced up and down over the snow. Then the ride grew smoother. We are on sea ice now, said Kathleen. Seals are beneath. I see their breathing holes. Perhaps we should stop. Indeed, said Teddy as they whizzed along. But how? Try tying a knot, said Annie. Excellent idea, said Teddy. Jack yanked off his gloves. With cold, shaky fingers, he tied a knot in the string. The wind lessened a bit. The sleigh began to slow down. He tied another. The sail started to droop. Hooray, said Annie. Jack tied a third knot, and the wind completely died away. The sleigh glided to a stop. Well done, said Teddy. Thanks, said Jack. He tucked the string back in his pocket and looked around. I wonder if this is where the Norns live. I will ask, said Kathleen. Ask who? Thought Jack. Kathleen climbed out of the sleigh. She walked over the sea ice, studying it closely. Then she stopped above a small hole. Kathleen knelt down and spoke softly in the Selkie language. Then she put her ear close to the hole in the ice and listened. A moment later, she stood up. The seal told me the curve of the bay lies just beyond those sea rocks, she said, pointing. That is where we will find the Norns. Great, said Annie. Jack, Annie, Teddy, and Kathleen crunched over the frozen sea under the bright moon. They walked through a narrow passage between the sea rocks. When they stepped out from the passage, they stopped. There 'tis, said Teddy. About 50 yards away was a large snowy white mound. Smoke was coming from a chimney on top of the mound. Lantern light flickered from a small round window. I know you must bargain for the ice wizard's eye alone. Oh, goodness. Excuse me, said Teddy. But I would at least like to take a peek at the Norns. He moved quietly to the window and peered into the house. The others joined him. They saw a large fire burning on a hearth. In its rosy glow, 3 strange creatures were weaving at a big loom. Jack caught his breath. Their appearance was shocking. Why, what did they look like? The 3 sisters of fate were as skinny as skeletons. They all had straggly hair, long noses, and huge bulging eyes. Their crooked, bony fingers fluttered over a large tapestry. There's the Norns' house. They sound kind of creepy, don't they? Around the room, other tapestries were stacked to the ceiling. They looked like witches in a fairy tale, whispered Annie. Aye, but they are not witches, said Teddy. Every cloth they weave is the history of a life. Wow, said Annie. Well, good luck, said Teddy. Kathleen and I will wait out here while you go inside and ask for the wizard's eye. Suddenly a terrible howl pierced the silence. Yikes, said Annie. The wolves, said Kathleen. Teddy hurried to the door and threw it open. Everyone inside, he said, and all 4 of them scrambled into the house of the Norns. They didn't knock first? Chapter 5. The Norns. Teddy slammed the door against the wolves. Jack caught his breath. Welcome, the 3 Norns said in unison. They all looked exactly alike, except they wore gowns of different colors, blue, brown, and gray. How are you, Jack, Annie, Teddy, and Kathleen? Said the blue Norn. We're good now, said Annie. Jack was amazed that the Norns knew all their names, despite their strange appearance. Their friendly smiles and twinkling eyes put him at ease. In their cozy house, he began to feel warm for the first time since they had left home. Was your journey pleasant? Asked the brown Norn. Yes, we came in the ice wizard's sleigh, said Annie. With the help of the wind string, said Teddy. Jack held up the string to show them. The gray Norn cackled. Yes, we know. I like a string with knots, she said. A string without knots would be a boring string indeed, said the blue Norn. A life without knots would be a boring life indeed, chimed in the brown Norn. As they spoke, the Norns kept weaving. Their bulging eyes never blinked. Jack sensed that they never closed their eyes or stopped their work. Sorry to bother you, said Annie, but Jack and I need the eye of the ice wizard of winter so we can save our friends Merlin and Morgan. We know, said the blue Norn. We are weaving the story of the ice wizard now. Come look. Jack moved with the others to the loom. Dozens of tiny pictures were woven into the tapestry. The threads were all wintry colors, blues, grays, and browns. The pictures tell the story of the wizard's life, explained the brown Norn. One picture showed 2 children playing together. Another showed a boy running after a swan. Another showed 2 white wolves, and another showed an eye in a circle. What's the story of the eye? Jack asked. Long ago, the ice wizard came to us seeking all the wisdom of the world, said the gray Norn. We said we would give him wisdom if he gave us one of his eyes. He agreed to the bargain. The wizard doesn't seem very wise, said Annie. Indeed he is not, said the brown Norn. We planted the seeds of wisdom in his heart, but they never grew. Why did you want his eye? Asked Jack. We wished to give it to the frost giant, said the blue Norn. The frost giant, said Teddy. Who is the frost giant? Here's the Norns. Look at them. Eee. Freaky. He is neither magician nor mortal, said the blue Norn. He is a blind force of nature that spares nothing in his path. We hoped the frost giant would use the wizard's eye to see the beauty of the world, so he might choose to care for it rather than destroy it, said the brown Norn. But alas, the frost giant does not use our gift at all. Instead, he keeps it hidden away right where we left it. Where's that? Asked Annie. The frost giant sleeps inside the hollow hill, said the gray Norn. In the hollow hill is a hole, said the blue Norn. In the hole is a hailstone, said the brown Norn. And in the heart of the hailstone hides the wizard's eye, said the gray Norn. Jack closed his eyes and repeated, in the hollow hill is a hole. In the hole is a hailstone. In the heart of the hailstone hides the wizard's eye. Yes, said the gray Norn. That is where you must go, but beware. You must never look directly at the frost giant. Anyone who looks directly at the frost giant will freeze to death at once. Jack shivered and nodded. Well, we'd better get going, said Annie. Thanks for your help. The ice wizard's rhyme tells us to pay you whatever you ask us to pay. The Norns looked at each other. I like that, weaving around her neck. I like that weaving around her neck, that's what she said. The gray Norn said to her sisters, 'Tis red like the fiery dawn. The other two Norns nodded eagerly. My scarf? Said Annie. Sure, here. She took off her red woolen scarf and placed it on the floor near the Norn's loom. Lovely, said the blue Norn. Perhaps we will stop weaving fates and start weaving scarves. The other Norns cackled. Well, go now, said the gray Norn. Travel toward the North Star. When you reach the snowy hills, look for the one whose peak is missing. Jack, Annie, and Teddy started toward the door, but Kathleen stayed behind. Forgive me, but I have one more question, she said. She pointed to the picture of the swan and the boy on the tapestry. What is this story? 'Tis a sad tale, said the gray Norn. The ice wizard had a younger sister who loved him more than anything in the world. One day they fought over something foolish. He lost his temper and told her to leave him alone forever. She ran down to the sea in tears. There she found a flock of swan maidens. They gave her a white feathered dress. She put on the dress and became a swan maiden herself. She flew away with the others and never returned. After that, the ice wizard was never the same, said the blue Norn. When his sister left, he grew cold and mean-spirited. 'Twas as if his sister took his heart with her when she flew away. That is sad, said Annie. How will the ice wizard's story end? You, not we, will determine the threads we weave next, said the brown Norn. We will, said Annie. Yes, said the gray Norn. Our powers are fading. Our plans no longer work the way we expect them to. The ice wizard has no wisdom. The frost giant has no sight. You must go now and finish the story. The three sisters smiled at their visitors. Their skinny fingers fluttered over their weaving like butterflies over flowers. Jack couldn't help smiling back at them. But then he thought about Merlin and Morgan. He thought about all the dangers waiting outside. One last question, he said. What's the story of the two white wolves? Oh, the wolves, said the blue Norn. Do not fear the wolves. A life without wolves would be a boring life indeed. Her two sisters smiled in agreement. For the moment, their smiles made Jack feel unafraid of the white wolves, and the ice wizard and the frost giant too. Goodbye, 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 said the three sisters. Jack and the others waved goodbye. Then they slipped out of the house of the Norns and into the icy night. Let's see. We'll try to read chapter 6. In the Hollow Hill is the name of the chapter. Standing in the cold, Jack felt afraid again. There were big paw prints in the moonlit snow all around the house. The wolves were here, said Kathleen. Perhaps we should go back inside, said Teddy. No, said Kathleen. We must walk with Jack and Annie back to the sleigh and send them on their journey to the hollow hill. Yes, of course, said Teddy, nodding. As they all headed cautiously toward the rocks, Jack glanced back at the house of the Norns. He wished they could return to its cozy warmth. Kathleen put her hand on his shoulder. Come, she said. You must hurry. Jack trudged with the others through the passage in the rocks. When they got to the other side, there was no sign of the two white wolves. The silver sleigh was waiting in the moonlight. Jack and Annie climbed inside it. Can't you come with us? Jack asked Teddy and Kathleen. Remember, you said if we all work together, we can do anything. Aye, said Teddy. But what the ice wizard said is true. Only mortals can undo a bargain with the fates. Do not fear, said Kathleen. We will be with you in spirit. Oh, goodness. And we will meet you back at the wizard's palace at dawn. How will you get there? Asked Annie. I have a few rhymes I can try, said Teddy, smiling. And I have a bit of selkie magic, said Kathleen. And we have our wind string, said Annie. Hasten, then, to the hollow hill, said Kathleen. And remember what the Norns told you, said Teddy. Never look at the frost giant. I know, said Jack. He pulled out the wind string. He took off his gloves and untied a knot. A breeze began to blow. Jack untied a second knot. The breeze grew stronger. The sail unfurled, and the runners slid forward. Jack untied a third knot. The wind blew hard. The white sail snapped, and the sleigh took off through the night. Stand fast, Teddy called after them. Jack and Annie waved goodbye to Teddy and Kathleen as the sleigh slid swiftly over the sea ice. Soon the sleigh bumped onto the snow-covered plain and veered off sharply to the right. No, toward the North Star, Jack called to Annie. Annie turned the rudder, steering the sleigh back on course. They sailed toward the bright star in the distance. As the silver runners swished across the windswept snow, Jack braced himself against the cold. He kept a lookout for the white wolves, but he didn't see any sign of them as the sleigh sped across the moonlit plain. Soon he could see a row of snow-covered hills in the distance. Look, he said, there it is. He pointed to one of the hills, the only one without a peak. Tie her down, Annie shouted. Jack tied a knot in the string, and the sleigh began to slow down. He tied a second, then a third. The wind died down completely, and the sleigh coasted to a stop at the foot of the hollow hill. Jack and Annie climbed out. Jack looked up at the steep white slope. How do we get inside? He said. I don't know, said Annie. How do you think the frost giant gets inside? Oh, the frost giant, said Jack. He really wished that Kathleen were with them. He felt as if part of their team was missing. Annie seemed to read his thoughts. We can do it, she said. We have to, for Morgan and Merlin. Jack nodded. You're right, he said. They studied the hill in the moonlight. Up there, is that an opening? Said Annie. Maybe, said Jack. Let's climb up and check it out. When they climbed a little way up the hill, Jack could clearly see a break in the snow-covered slope. Let's see if it leads inside, said Annie. Wait, what about the frost giant? Said Jack. I have a feeling he's not here right now, said Annie. We'd better go in and find the wizard's eye before he comes back. Okay, said Jack, but be careful. They scurried farther up the slope. When they came to the opening, they stepped through the huge crack into the hill. Jack and Annie found themselves on a ledge above a deep, rounded hollow. Moonlight flooded down through the open hilltop. At the bottom of the hollow was a flat spot where it looked as if the snow had been blown in circles. That must be where the giant sleeps, said Annie. Can't stop yawning. Yeah, and it's probably where he hides the eye, said Jack. We just have to find a hole, remember? He repeated what the Norns had said. In the hollow hill is a hole. In the hole is a hailstone. In the heart of the hailstone hides the wizard's eye. Right, said Annie. Jack looked down at the snowy swirl. He looked back at Annie. Onward? Onward, she whispered. Jack and Annie scrambled down into the hollow. Stepping carefully through the silver moonlight, they studied the ground, looking for the hole. Annie stumbled and fell. Whoa, she said. I think I just found the hole. I stepped in it. Really? Said Jack. He knelt down beside her. Annie reached down into a small hole in the floor of the hollow. There's something in here, she said. She pulled out a chunk of ice the size of an egg. The hailstone? In the dim light, it was impossible to see if anything was inside the ice chunk. We don't know if this is the right hailstone, said Jack. We'll have to wait till daylight to see if the eye's in there. It has to be the right one, said Annie. How many hailstones are hidden in a hole in a hollow hill? Good point, said Jack. Annie turned the hailstone over in her hand. Maybe the eye is looking at us now, she said. That's scientifically impossible, said Jack. An eye can't see unless it's connected to a brain. Yeah, and a string can't make the wind blow either, said Annie. Forget science in this place. Wait, she caught her breath. Did you feel that? Feel what? Said Jack. The ground's shaking, said Annie. Jack did feel the ground trembling. He heard a strange sound, too, a loud huffing sound coming from outside the hill. Huff, huff, huff. It sounded like breathing. The giant's back, said Annie. Oh, no, cried Jack. The ground kept rumbling. The breathing sounds got louder. Hide the hailstones, said Jack. Annie shoved the ice chunk into her pocket. Huff, huff, huff. It sounded like the giant was entering the hollow. He's coming, said Annie. Hide, whispered Jack. Jack pulled Annie into the shadows. He remembered the gray Norn's warning. Anyone who looks directly at the frost giant will freeze to death at once. Whatever you do, don't look at him, he whispered to Annie. Crouching in the dark, they buried their faces in their hands and waited. Whew. Wow. Well, we're going to stop there at chapter 7, the frost giant. Then maybe we'll get to see what he looks like. Okay. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. See you on the next one.